With episode 4 of Welcome to Derry, it turns out it's not just killer clowns you gotta watch out for in Derry, but secrets as well. On and off camera. I can't believe this. So who is Madeleine Stowe playing? Well, HBO told us not to talk about it. They're like, don't you dare! When you get screeners, there's a do not spoil list. But I guess the people who cut the trailers at HBO did not get this list. Because they released a trailer. I was wondering why. I don't always watch, once I have seen the screeners, I don't always watch the trailers after that. Because I don't want to have it ruined what is left to come. Because, sometimes you guys are like, Grace, you're giving away it because you've seen the extra episodes. So I try to be somewhat as surprised as you. And so I was wondering how so many of you were like, is that Mrs Kersh? I was like, And then apparently there was on this season on Welcome to Derry trailer, where she says the exact same line that Mrs. Kersh said in It Chapter 2. And by the way, is sporting a very nice look. I like the mini bangs and red lip there, whoever Madeleine Stowe is playing. So is she playing Bob Gray's daughter? And is his daughter in cahoots with her papa? Or is she maybe working against him? That would be interesting, right? As she has been making a strong case for being Maturin related. Some of you think she took that turtle charm off the bracelet. And to be fair, we have not seen the turtle charm since. But Maturin has to be somewhere on this show, as there are turtles frickin' everywhere. But on that note, another actress, Kimberly Norris Guerrero, who plays Rose, revealed in a behind-the-scenes interview on HBO that her tribe is called the Children of Maturin. How did they not edit that out? And I didn't even know that, by the way, because I guess it gets revealed after episode 5 because the press has only gotten through episode 5 of 8. I mean, these are big reveals that the show itself has done a very good job hiding. And yet here they are in HBO promotional material. Is HBO trying to give the show an extra boost, right? Although they rob the show of the chatter when it's revealed within the show. They never reported viewership for episode 2, which dropped early on Halloween, as you might recall, causing mass confusion. People are like, what? Is it out? But they did report viewership for episode 3. And what do you know? It fell by about 1 million views from the debut episode. Now, that's within the first 3 days. However, HBO says that overall, Welcome to Derry is averaging 9.2 million viewers per episode in the United States and 15 million globally, which still puts it in their top 3 for freshman seasons. So I know you're still watching Welcome to Derry, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're just watching these breakdowns. But do you still watch it when it drops, or at least in the first 3 days, or are you catching it a little bit later down the line? And do you know anyone who watched the first episode, but then said, meh, I'm good, peace out, and stopped watching? All right, now let's talk about the secrets in the show. So Madeleine Stowe, the show hasn't called her Mrs. Kersh yet. We don't know for sure. All right, but she's this character, Madeleine Stowe's character is right. Seeing is believing. But too bad there's nothing for the police to see, as the photos have mysteriously changed. Well, all except the photo of Pennywise. And unfortunately, these police aren't freaked out by clowns. I'd still send someone to take a look because supernatural or not, there's still some dude in a weird outfit walking around the cemetery at night. But a Bowers is a Bowers. Also, they've already got kids and the military looking into Pennywise. This party's already got enough people in it. But thankfully, the Hanlon family is not only a loving family, but they haven't been in Derry long enough for the vibe of the town to get to them, to get to the adults in the family. At least not yet. Wouldn't that be interesting if by the end of the season, and remember, I haven't seen the final 3 episodes, if maybe the vibe of Derry does get to Charlotte and Leroy. That would be so tragic. Right now, they're such a wonderful family. Charlotte finds Will's photos and actually asks him for his side of the story. And what do you know? He actually tells her. Is this the Hollywood production? Do we have a family that's actually nice to each other? Oh my God. But alas, the Hanlon family still isn't loving or trusting enough because Charlotte and Will decide not to tell Dad, and Dad's not telling them about Operation Precept, even though his family is clearly very smart. I mean, really, Charlotte and Will are both very intelligent, and they're in danger. You would think he would want their advice, right? But no. I think that's a real shame, and he's putting them in just horrible danger. Speaking of the danger that the family finds itself in, I think one of the interesting commentaries this show has had is that, the Uris and the Hanlon patriarchs are prepared for the very real world hate of racism and bigotry. And that's what they assume is happening to their respective families. Particularly Leroy Hanlon, when, his son tells him there's someone outside watching the house, he suspects racism, but then he sees the red balloon and he knows it's something supernatural. Did you see it, by the way? Did you? Leroy Hanlon is afraid. That part of his brain is supposed to be destroyed in his accident, his plane crash. That's the whole reason they want him for Operation Precept. But both times that It/Pennywise has come for his son, and we've seen the red balloon, Leroy Hanlon has been afraid. I think that's a great choice. So afraid that he goes to Dick Hallorann first, hoping that, because, they're both, from the same community in the military, that he might be able to get some real answers about what they're dealing with. But Dick Hallorann has secrets of his own. On the surface, things are going great for Dick Hallorann. He has this cool new night spot that he and his fellow soldiers are building. It's going to become the Black Spot. I told you, keep an eye on this storyline. It's very important. And he's also very valuable at work, which is how he got the space for the Black Spot. But his dead grandma, who also had and seems to still have in death the same psychic abilities, is warning him, keep that lid on tight. What does she mean by that? But it makes Dick Hallorann afraid. And when Leroy demands, pleads for some answers, Dick decides to keep his secrets. So much for their camaraderie, right? So Leroy, that's not going to stop Leroy. His family's in danger, particularly his son. So he goes to General Shaw. And Shaw lets him witness Dick Hallorann's interrogation of Daniel, the Native American teenager. And we learn a lot. But first, I want to point out something that really struck me. Here we have two men of color representing old world cultures, beliefs, and abilities. Two men who know that they should be leaving this thing alone. Yet they are fighting each other due to the unchecked ambitions of a white man who is going after something that's also ancient. And the white man isn't even bothering to understand any of the elements that he's dealing with. All three, Dick, Daniel, and Pennywise. Instead, General Shaw is laser focused on his own assumptions and ambitions. I'm just saying. And I thought it was really sad because, again, neither Dick or Daniel wanted to be doing this. They didn't want to be going after Pennywise. They didn't want to be doing this to each other. Did you notice that when you saw that scene? Anyway, in this episode, we revisit the origin of it because we'd already talked about it in the movies. But here we get some really important new information. So it seems that for a decent amount of time, the Native American tribe, for generations, was able to coexist with it by staying away from it so that it couldn't feed and therefore wasn't powerful enough to leave those woods. But when the settlers showed up, they were like, these are some nice woods. Why should we they probably didn't even believe the Native Americans that the land was cursed, but they were like, we're going to go in here anyway. And they ended up feeding it, and it became eventually powerful enough to leave the woods. So some Native American 12-year-olds, it's always 12-year-olds. This is the Native American Losers Club. There were no bikes back in the day, but they had everything else. And although back in the day, did you notice that it was hunting adults? Why doesn't it hunt adults anymore? Was it personal once those 12-year-olds trapped it? Or maybe it is too weak to hunt adults. If it were to become powerful again, maybe not feed every 20. They didn't address why it was every 27 years. But maybe if it were to become very powerful again, it could go after adults. And it technically went after adults in It Chapter 2. But again, it's because it was personal from when they were 12. But an interesting distinction. All right, so these 12-year-olds get more of the ancient falling star that brought it to Earth and has been the only thing that's ever been able to contain it, although not before it killed the mother of the leader of the Losers Club, who was also the chieftain. But so they got more ceremonial daggers. Before, the tribe only had one, which they had used to, kind of fight it when they needed to. But they get 12 more, giving them 13, and they bury them all deep in the ground, right? To keep it, Pennywise, trapped. So what happened? Well, they didn't say, but it seems to me that some idiot settler decided to build Derry within the confines of those totems, right? It was like, again, I don't believe your story, and this looks like a great piece of land. All right, so how can the military find those buried totems? That's what they want to know. They want to be able to triangulate its location. Although, again, the kids in It Chapter 1 didn't need any of this fancy stuff to find it. But yes, they get on the right track, because how do you go underground? You go through the Derry sewer system. And the best entry point is the house on Neibolt Street, which is, of course, where the old well used to be. All right, so Dick is mighty powerful in this sequence. I loved the visuals, and he's getting on both as Professor X and as Doctor Strange. Did you see him touch his third eye when he truly went in to get the information? What I found ironic about this scene is that to Daniel, Dick Hallorann is the villain. He's the Pennywise lurking in Daniel's nightmare. Daniel is a child in this interaction, around, I think, probably 12, actually. Isn't that really interesting? Dick Hallorann is digging around in this child Daniel's brain and manipulating it. He even smiles at him like Pennywise and creates horrific images like Rose's eyes sticking. That, to me, was fascinating. But while Dick Hallorann is hunting Pennywise with magic, so to speak, Will Hanlon is going after Pennywise with science. So just as Ben will do years later, Will says, we ought to look into the history of Derry. And Lily says, let me ask my buddy Madeleine Stowe, whoever she might be playing, because she's lived in Derry for a long time. And sure enough, she thinks back to the 1930s, with 1935 being its last feeding period, where the Bradley gang came from. And she says, now that I think about it, a lot of kids did go missing back then. But since it was the Great Depression, we just assumed they all ran away to try and, find a better situation. Because, everybody was having a hard time back then. But considering who Madeleine Stowe, again, might be playing, can we really believe anything that she says? Although the story makes sense. So Will, though, he has, in addition to looking into the history of Derry, he also comes up with another theory. He says, clearly this thing could kill us at any time that it wanted to. So why doesn't it? Instead, it just keeps scaring us. And Will says, how did it know my worst nightmare? Speaking of nightmares, I thought it was funny that Charlotte says to her husband, why don't you spend some time with our son? And Leroy's idea is forced sports. Isn't he paying attention? But that's not Will's worst nightmare. And I think it's quite touching that Will's worst nightmare is his dad not surviving that plane crash that, took away his ability to be scared. Although apparently, it's not working because he's very scared about his family. Will theorizes that just like some predators are attracted to fear pheromones, maybe it's the same thing with this creature. And then Lily has a really interesting idea. She says, let's take my mom's Valium and that way we won't feel anything. This is brilliant. All right, so interestingly, back in the 1960s, Valium was very big with housewives. It had just been approved for use, and with the rise of the suburbs, a lot of housewives felt trapped and alone. And these pills were prescribed and popped like candy. The Rolling Stones even had a hit song in 1966 called Mother's Little Helper. From 1968 to 1982, Valium was the best-selling medication in America. Again, almost exclusively prescribed to women. And in fact, even as the women's movement took shape, they were marketing it to single women as well. Any woman who was unhappy, they were telling them they should take Valium. It's horrible. It lasted through 1982. And why did it stop? Because people started to find out that Valium was addictive. So very clever to use it here. Although I have to say, to me, the most terrifying thing in this episode was that Lily took the one that fell in the toilet. I was like, oh no, Lily, I don't know if you should take that. I mean, she was facing down Pennywise, but the toilet Valium? I don't know. There's a reason that gag in Toy Story with Woody on the toilet got such a big laugh. Would you have taken it? I guess you kind of have to, but ew. But Marge needed her, gosh darn it, although Lily didn't know that Marge was just about to humiliate Lily in the school cafeteria to get in good with Patty and the patty cakes. This episode, in fact, features two people doing things they shouldn't, taking advantage of old friends. General Shaw with Rose and her people, and Dick Hallorann. And then, of course, Marge with Lily. Marge, to her credit, does try to come clean in the bathroom. It's not only too mean, but I think she realizes or is starting to realize who her real friend is. Because you see Marge touch her sweater in the mirror, and that's the sweater that Patty is always calling out for being clearly like the only sweater that I think Marge owns. And a good friend wouldn't do that. But Pennywise doesn't give Marge the chance. I guess he's sowing problems between friends too. He's like, and he uses Marge's fear of looking bug-eyed in her new glasses against her and gives her the snail eyes from the film in class. That was pretty good. I thought that was really amazing. And I mean, that was really gross. And Marge, though, it turns out, is a doer and sets out to solve her new problem in the woodworking shop. Oh my God, Marge, what did you think was going to happen? I mean, if you thought those were really your eyes, how did you think you would survive the blood loss? Whew. All right, but it's just an illusion, and Lily is able to stop her, although Marge has injured herself. But woo! Lily, it looks pretty bad for Lily when the rest of the school runs into the woodworking shop. I mean, I was like, I gotta tell you, Lily, this looks really bad for you. Because sometimes, even when we're innocent, things can look really bad. Like for poor Hank Grogan. Speaking of bored housewives, there's Charlotte Hanlon. What a shame. Charlotte's so smart, but she's having a really tough time. She can't be a teacher, which is her profession. And by the way, Rose, not cool either, Rose. Rose is taking advantage of Charlotte's boredom to try and get information on what's going on at the military base. Charlotte could use a real friend, Rose. Thank you very much. But then also, she's not, her husband apparently has made it very clear to her he doesn't want her to get involved in her other activity, which is the civil rights movement. But with what's going on with Hank, she rightfully so, can't help herself. She's got to do it. And it turns out she's very effective at her job. So effective that there was a brick thrown through the window of their last home because people in that town weren't happy with how good Charlotte was at getting civil rights done. So she's able to get in to see Hank, even though she's not related to him, even though she's not representing him. How does she do it? She goes to Hank's mom. Well, she not only goes to Hank's mom and gets a letter saying she has the mother's permission, but she threatens to call down the civil rights movement on the Derry PD, which is going to be a lot of negative press. So she gets in to see Hank. And it turns out Hank is being denied his rights, right? He should, it turns out, be out on bail. But Hank has bigger problems because he does tell Charlotte where he was. It's supposed to be a private conversation, obviously, but there's a lot of shenanigans, to put it lightly. And so I'm surprised that he was willing to say it out loud at all. I'm surprised he didn't just whisper it to Charlotte. But he tells her that night he wasn't just out with a woman, but it was a white woman and a married white woman. By the way, so this is the 1960s, and so that's really a bad situation. And I think it's brilliant of the script in the same episode to have Leroy, when he finds out his son has a crush on someone at school, to discreetly ask his wife what is the ethnicity of that girl, because he's also worried about even his son's safety for a similar situation. So Hank feels if people find out, he won't even get a trial, not even a sham trial. They'll just find the nearest tree and maybe even hurt this woman as well. And Charlotte, as optimistic and as big of a fighter as she is, well, she doesn't correct him. So what is Hank going to do, especially because he's going to be sent to Shawshank very soon? All right, so, by the way, what did you think of the old school nuclear safety film that they show? I bet you that's the real one. Pretty crazy that the government thought anyone would believe that. But in fact, at that time, a lot of people did. Although, I guess to some degree, you believe what you have to and able to get through the day. That was like visual Valium to a degree, I guess. That's an interesting correlation. All right, so what did you think of this week's episode? Are you enjoying it, or are you like, where's this freaking clown, man? Sit tight. I think you'll be pretty happy next week. All right, share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.